So we now come to the time we're going to look at primary matters. Primary matters. And even though this is applied to all poetical passages, what I'm about to say, we're going to really focus in right now on the Psalms, because that's the passages that you've been assigned. You've been given a psalm to preach, and that's the main example that I've been working through in this course. When we get to wisdom genre and we look at the other those books of wisdom genre, Job, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, we'll be talking about the primary matters for each of those books specifically at that point. But anyway, let's get started with talking about primary matters in regards to poetical genre. The subject, the context, and the detail matters. The what, the why, and the how are still the goal of the exegetical process. That hasn't changed. That hasn't changed. If you look at the chart that's on the web page, it's also in your notes. The what, why, how is the goal. You've been doing all this exegesis to get to the what, why, how, because you cannot preach what you do not know. And if you don't have the answers to the questions of what, why, how can you compose a sermon? Your sermon still will come from the what, why, how, still be based off that. And then you incorporate all those details that you've learned in the exegetical process as you do your sermon content document. And we're going to get to sermon content document and sermon content for poetical genre after we look at the wisdom genre. So we'll be looking at sermon content later on. But it's all built upon the what, why, how. So the same thing holds true. Everything points to there. However, how do you answer these questions? That is unique in a sense. You answer the questions, you answer the what, why, how questions after you have completed all the other steps, which some of these steps are kind of unique and because it's poetical language. Some of are similar, like if you look at the chart, there's significant words, right? History, that's the historical occasion, even though there's a little bit of uniqueness there as we described. But when you talk about relationships of the lines to each other, you know, is the couplets and the tercecs that we talked about, the figures of speech, the figurative language, the classification of type for the psalm, all of those things, some of those are new kinds of things that you've been doing that you have not had to do for epistles and for narrative. So when you think about all that, it all comes together in stanza analysis. Your stanza analysis summaries. Remember, after each assignment, after each exegetical step, you have taken your stanza analysis summaries and you've been expanding on each one. You've been adding more information, incorporating what you have learned into that stanza analysis summaries, each one of those, depending on how many you have for the psalm that you've been assigned. And so when you're going to determine what is the what, why, and how, you do all of the exegesis. As you do the exegesis, it helps you to analyze the stanzas and be able to have a summary and an understanding of the flow of thought that comes from the stanzas. And then when you do that, then you look to answer the questions. The primary matters. The answers to the questions will come from various aspects of the summaries. You're going to walk through those summaries, and after you've read back through them and developed them, that is going to give you the basis of how to go from all that exegesis to labeling what is the what, the why, and the how. And that's what's different because of being a different genre. Narrative, you did it differently, right? It came from the plot. From the epistle, you saw it in connection to your diagram, the structure, and as you did exegesis, it filled all that information in, and your structure became very obvious. The structure, the logical flow of Paul's writing or Peter's writing, and you could determine what is the what, why, and how from that. For poetry, for poetical genre, it becomes like a building process. Every time you do an assignment, you build upon the summary analysis. the stanza analysis summaries. You add more and more and incorporate more and more information into that. And then you go back and read all of those summaries and you ask yourself, what is the what? What is the why? What's the how? And you write that out accordingly. So you have to go through all the exegetical steps. After each exegetical step, you have to incorporate what you've learned into your stanza analysis summaries. And then when you get ready to ask yourself, okay, what's the what, why, how? Go back to that stanza analysis summary. Those summaries, look at each one, read them, and begin to determine the what, the why, and the how. So the preacher must be diligent to understand the passage in such a way that he correctly answers the what, why, how questions and avoids any and all misunderstandings or inaccurate interpretations. You want to make sure you get it right. You want to make sure you really have determined the what, the why, and the how, and you've done it correctly so that you can compose your sermon based on that structure. So more specifically, what is the procedure? I've kind of talked about it, but let's walk through this. So you read through the passage and your summaries of each stanza. So go back through, look at the passage again. That's one of the reasons why I've had you write out the passage for each of the major assignments, mostly, because I want you to be very understanding of what the words are. So you go back through, read the passage, keep going through it, keep remembering, putting together everything you've learned. Look through your summaries. That's why you want to write good, detailed summaries. We've been talking about that in class. I've been emphasizing to you how your summaries cannot be just 2 or 3 statements. It may start that way, but by the time you get done, you got good paragraphs here, more information. You incorporated that in. Then you begin to assess and ask yourself, what is the author's intent? What is his reason for writing? What is he talking about? The general flow. What's the general flow of his conversation or his composition? You got to remember to consider the feelings of the author, because those feelings and emotions help guided him through the process of writing and composing the song. He didn't write this and compose this apart from the feelings that he was having. He was expressing those feelings in words. So, go through that exegetical procedure. When you get to the end, begin to finalize your thoughts, and then you ask and answer the 3 questions. What is the subject matter of the passage? Identify that in one word. And there's a reason why it's one word. I've talked to you about this. You're trying to think of the one word broad concept that fits that passage. Now, you don't want to say, oh, the subject is lament. Don't use the same classification category. This passage is about wisdom. Don't do that. If it's wisdom, what specific kind of wisdom is being discussed? If it's a lament, in what way is he lamenting? What specifically is he lamenting about? So the subject matter, the what, is not the same thing as the classification. If you classify the psalm correctly, it will help you in determining what is the what of the passage. But you got to ask yourself, what is the what of the passage? Get that one word concept, because if you do, it'll help you to be able to compose your sermon introduction. Then you ask yourself, why did the author address this subject matter in writing these poetical reflections? And again, one word, general reason. And this is when you do your historical occasion, when you're doing that, and that's why you still have to do this. You still have to work through your historical occasion, even if you don't have a direct reference, because the more you can determine there, that's going to be a help to you in why did the author write this? For what purpose is he putting this composition together? What motivated him? What did he want to accomplish? We call that the contextual matter. Then you ask yourself, okay, how does the author logically develop his subject in contextual matters for his readers. And this would be a series of sentences that fully answers this question with these needed detail matters. So that's where your understanding of the structure. And it may not be that every how statement comes from a stanza. One stanza, one how statement. That may not be. Some stanzas may not function as, okay, I'm going to outline each stanza. No, don't. It's not that simple. You got to examine each stanza, but some of the stanzas may be providing you the what and the why. It may not be giving you the how. And sometimes you may have two how statements within one stanza. That could happen too. So it's not a formula. You can't, similar to narrative, you can't think of it like a formula. But you still have to break it into stanzas and do those stanza analysis summaries so that you have the general flow. And as we come to class, we're going to have a workshop on primary matters. We're going to look at this. We're going to take some passages, and I'm going to show you, discuss more with you about how to process what you're learning and be able to put it together. And we may even take some of your passages that you've been working on and talk about them in class. And get everybody else to give input as much as possible. So we're gonna do some workshops on this, and I'm going to teach you the process. It's not a formula, but it's a way of thinking. When you're going to determine the answers to the questions of the what, why, how. Now, when you look at the example on the web page, you see that I've completed all of the stanza summaries and posted those here on the web page. They're here. I've updated them because I've also completed significant words. We didn't have a session on significant words specifically, but I've made a mention of how you need to have that done in class or have that assignment done. There's a worksheet made available for that. You want to, your final stanza analysis summaries include what you've learned from your significant words. After you do all of that, and you start going through the procedure, then you take a look at your stanza analysis and you begin to ask the questions, what is the what, why, and how. Begin to answer them. And for my psalm, you see below the stanza summaries, the final version of my stanza summaries, you see my subject matter, contextual matter, detail matters. You see what I put there for the what, the why, and the how. And I want you to look at that. We're going to talk about that in class. I'll walk you through the process in more detail about how I went through that and developed that and came up with that. But here's what I want you to do. Take the passage that you've been working on. After you've completed significant words, if you haven't done that yet, do the final version of your stanza analysis, summaries. Then I want you to begin to ask yourself, what is the what, why, how? One word concept for the what, one word concept for why, and a series of statements and put the verse references, okay, where each how statement is connected to in terms of the passage. Begin to do that. Bring that with you to class, because that'll be helpful. We can actually help you right in class during our primary matters session, so that when you walk away from that class session, to have that feel good about your primary matters, so that you can begin to start working on your sermon, start composing your sermon, and start working through that. So again, that's the process. You're familiar with primary matters. In essence, it doesn't change. But how you get there, you can see some of the uniquenesses of what you got to do to get there, and how you got to think through the process to actually answer the questions. It's not exactly the same as the epistles and narrative. And so in class, like I said, we'll go through more of that and teach you more of that and how to think through the passage so that you can answer the questions, the what, the why, and the how, the primary matters. And once you have that, once you know those, and you have the answers to those questions, then you have the foundation for a sermon that you can compose and preach to your people.